there the ROI. What's the cost of not having the conversation? Because I can understand this pain-reward thing. Can you give us some tips from Crucial Accountability on how do we hold people accountable, or maybe how do we make it even clearer what they're accountable for?
Is we think that our job is to point out the gap and your job is to close the gap, right? All I need to do is tell you what the gap is and you're supposed to fix that gap.
That sounds like my husband.
Absolutely.
I'm very excited today to be joined by Emily Gregory, co-author of Crucial Conversations. We've been partners with Crucial Learning since 2018, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome you to the Biz Group HQ.
Hazel, it is wonderful to be here with Biz Group. The work that you are doing in UAE and across the Middle East is so exciting, and we're just glad to be a part of it.
So let's start with a little bit of an introduction. You're a co-author of the book, but tell me your role in Crucial Learning and how come we're so lucky to have you here.
So I've been with Crucial Learning for about 20 years now, and in addition to co-authoring Crucial Conversations, I spent most of my time working with clients, just like your clients here, going out, facilitating workshops, presenting the big ideas. I've also led product development for 15 years and had a short stint in sales and operations. So I've really seen all the sides of the business, and I think what that has given me an appreciation for is within our client organizations, just the complexity of the challenges that they're taking on.
So, Emily Gregory, it's fantastic to have you for your first visit to the Middle East.
Yes, I'm delighted to be here, Hazel. It's such an amazingly vibrant place, and it's just exciting to come and learn.
So give me a potted history about how you found the world of Crucial Learning and became an expert in Crucial Conversations.
Yes, well, with probably every good example, it's by accident is how I found it. So I had actually started my career in medicine and had gone to medical school, had worked for the National Institutes of Health in the United States and was off in that direction. And because of some of those experiences, had decided to go back and get a degree in business. So got an MBA and was lucky enough to take a class from Kerry Patterson, whose name you'll see on the front cover of the book. He was the founder of Crucial Learning and the co-author of many of our books. And he just really lit in me this fire to say, you can do something to help organizations and individuals lead better lives. And so that's what brought me to Crucial Learning. And I would say probably what kept me there is, quite honestly, I loved this ability to go into organizations and give them skills that will help them be more effective. And at the very same time, the people in the classes, they're taking these skills and using them at home. They're using them with their partners and their kids and the relationships that matter most. And so it just seemed like such a win to be able to say, we are absolutely helping organizations be more effective, but we're also helping individuals and families be more effective.
And that resonates so much with me because our purpose at Biz Group is enriching lives through learning. And lives isn't just at work, lives is outside of work.
It doesn't stop at the door when you leave the office, and that's what's so neat about it.
Fantastic. So, such a crucial thing to have a decent conversation. Yes. How come leaders struggle with that so much?
I think there's a couple of reasons that is impacted. And maybe the first one that I would talk about is, I think we miscalculate the ROI. Right? So leaders are really good at looking at what do I have to invest and what's my return going to be? And when we look at conversations, we miscalculate in a couple of really predictable ways. So first of all, we tend to overestimate the investment that I'm going to have to make. It's going to be really hard. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be awful. And then we look at the return and say, it's probably just going to create more conflict. I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I don't want to make it worse. And the idea of silence seems to give us a better return. But what we do when we make that calculation is we miss the opportunity costs. And when we don't have a conversation, we fail to understand, we just accept the status quo, and we miss the opportunity that the relationship could get better, that things could improve, that we could do something really extraordinary. So we're doing bad math.
Okay.
And I think it's pretty natural. I guess the one other thing I would say to be really clear about is, leaders don't avoid these conversations because they don't care, or because they have bad motives, or they just,
bad people.
No, they're not bad people. They really want to do great work, but sometimes we lack the skill to have these conversations effectively.
So you mentioned there the ROI. What's the cost of not having the conversation? Because I can understand this pain reward thing. Feels too painful, am I going to get a reward? So what's the cost of avoiding conversations?
It's hard to quantify, but I would give you a couple ways to look at it. One, the biggest cost is status quo. We just accept the status quo. And so we're missing all the opportunity for growth, for expansion, for creativity, for innovation, because we accept things as they are. Now, quantifying that opportunity cost can be a little bit difficult. We did a study several years ago, about 10 years ago now, actually, and we asked people to say, if you had to put a number on a crucial conversation that you're avoiding, that you haven't had, what number would you say this is costing your organization? And on average, the average crucial conversation cost about $7,500 US per conversation, and 7 days of time. Wasted time, workarounds, avoiding the conversation, ruminating and thinking about the conversation rather than doing the work I'm supposed to. So I always have that figure in my mind of $7,500 US per conversation and 7 days of time. But that being said, I think there's another way to look at the cost too that leaders should really look at when they think about the cost of not having crucial conversations. And this is what I encourage people to do. Write down a list of all the problems and challenges that your organization is facing right now that is costing you money, the pain points you know are there. And then as you look at that problem list, ask yourself, how many of these are going to get better without talking about them? And my guess is, none of them are going to get better. They're not just magically going to go away. The only way any of those problems get solved is if we start talking about them. So if you look at your problem list and you assign a cost to all of the problems you're facing, that's the cost of avoiding the crucial conversation.
Look, I think there's never a time where you should say now's the time to have a crucial accountability conversation. But let's be honest, we're coming towards the end of the year. A lot of people have those dreaded performance reviews. We've got to start looking at, here's what I expected from you, here's what you delivered. Can you give us some tips from Crucial Accountability on how do we hold people accountable, or maybe how do we make it even clearer what they're accountable for?
Yes, so you're right? We should be having these kinds of conversations. I like to actually call them gap conversations, because I think sometimes when we talk about problems or accountability, there's kind of a sense of ickiness that comes with that. Nobody likes to be held accountable. But all we're really doing here is having a gap conversation between what I was expecting and what's actually happening, and we want to figure out how to close the gap. Now, I would say the number one misstep that managers and leaders make when holding these conversations is we think that our job is to point out the gap and your job is to close the gap, right? All I need to do is tell you what the gap is, and you're supposed to fix that gap.
That sounds like my husband.
Absolutely. But what the very best managers and the very best leaders understand is that if you really want to close the gap, you need to be in collaboration with that other person. And yes, sometimes, and we love these people in our life, when all we have to do is say, hey, Hazel, this is what I was expecting and this is what's actually happening. Like, can we do something about that? And you say, oh, yep, I solved that problem for you, right? It's on it. That's great. But if not, then it's my responsibility as a manager, truly as a leader who I think is really at heart a coach, to say, let's figure out how we're going to close this gap. And the number one thing you need to be able to do in order to do that is to understand what's causing the gap. And that's where diagnosis of the gap is so, so important, is to say, I can't solve a problem I don't understand. So let me take some time to actually understand the gap versus here's the gap and here's what we're going to do to fix the gap. You miss that step of what's causing this gap. And that's what I think is so crucial in these conversations.
And how do you make it so that one of my bad habits is, okay, here's the gap. Maybe we've diagnosed the gap. How do I help you? In fact, let me do it for you. How do I make sure that then that responsibility stays back with the individual to own the execution?
Yes.
Otherwise, you become a micromanager or a bottleneck.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first I would say help them own the diagnosis as well, and that's through asking questions. So rather than me diagnosing it for you and saying, Hazel, there's this gap. Here's the 5 reasons I think this gap might be happening. I start by asking you, why is this gap happening? Now, this is what is counterintuitive about this. If someone's come to us because they're not performing at a certain level, we sort of automatically assume that they don't know why they're not performing at that level, or they'd already solved the problem. But that's so often not the case. When you say, why do you think this is? They'll have reasons. They're the closest person to the problem. So start by asking them questions to involve them in the diagnosis, which is then going to make it easier for them to be that solution driver that you want them to be.
To own that next step.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, fantastic. There's a lot of change going on in the world right now, and an awful lot of uncertainty as well with the pace of change, particularly because of artificial intelligence and that changing. Influence plays a very important role in change. Tell me why you think influence is going to be one of those crucial skills for leaders in the future.
Absolutely. So I think about it this way. I think there's kind of two buckets of problems that leaders need to solve. First, they need to be able to answer the question, what are we going to do? That's strategy, right? That's sitting in rooms, mapping out things on whiteboards and figuring out what it is that we're going to do. And then, and this is the second, how are we going to get people to do it? And that's influence. And I think the balance is that so often, especially in times of rapid change, we are so focused on what do we need to do and what's the market opportunity and how can we exploit it and what's our strategy and how our strategy is shifting, that we fail to consider once we've got that strategy, once we've answered that problem of what do we want people to do, we have to bring the influence skills to bear to say, and how do we get them to do it? Because you can have all the strategy in the world, but if you can't bring people along, especially through times of change, it's not going to go anywhere for you. So that's why influence is going to be so crucial going forward. It answers that question of how do we get people to do it?
So if influence is so critical on how do we do it, what are some of the mistakes that leaders make when they are trying to influence people with the best of intentions?
Yes, I would say the number one mistake that leaders make when trying to influence people is that they too heavily rely on positional power, right? To say, I'm the leader, and so all I need to do is tell you what to do, and then you'll do it because I'm in charge, right? We rely on, not ill-intended, but this is often how we were taught to lead, that when someone, when your parent says do this, you do it, right? And we have grown up under a model in which positional power is the primary influence source. And what I think we're seeing in the world today is that doesn't hold water anymore. That's not going to work anymore. And so influencers, leaders need to expand their toolkit, really, of what they can draw on, what levers they can draw on to try and influence people's behavior, other than just, I've told you this is what we're going to do, and now I expect you to do it.
Okay. So a lot of the time we find managers have the courage to start the crucial conversation, to highlight the gap. I was expecting this, this is what I'm getting. And what can often happen is a whole load of reasons why. And perhaps it's nothing to do with me, not really able to look in the mirror and say it's anything to do with me, it's the system, it's the process, maybe it's even somebody else. There's a fair amount of blame culture because there's still a fair amount of fear culture about what the consequences are of that gap. What advice would you give managers where maybe how do they make it safe to talk about the gap, but also how do they make it okay for the individual to take on that gap and believe it's themselves or they can control something about it?
Yeah. So let me give you that's a great question. Let me give you two thoughts on this, on approaching it. One, whenever I hear that, it's the system, it's this, right, and those external factors, I think that there's a little bit of an element of what we would call a helpless story, right? I'm telling myself that I'm helpless to solve this problem because the system is too powerful and too big around me. And the counter to that for managers is to help coach people to ask this crucial question, which is, what can I do right now to move toward what I really want? Yes, the system is the system, and maybe I can't wave a magic wand and change it, but is there something I can do within the system to start moving in the direction I really want? So that's a great coaching question for managers to ask in that moment. The other thing that I think is really crucial that is difficult is that sometimes managers need to shift the gap conversation. And here's what I mean. You were coming to me to talk about a gap, right? I was expecting this, performing down here, what the reason is. I give you this reason. It's the system, I can't do anything. And every time we talk about a gap, that's my knee-jerk response, to say it's the system. That's a new gap, and the conversation sounds different. And let me just give you an example of what I mean. It would sound like coming to me and saying, Emily, I want to talk about how we're working together when I give you feedback, and a pattern that I've noticed. I've noticed that when I come to talk to you about some of the gaps or areas I think we can improve, you have a tendency to go pretty quickly to, it's the system that's the problem. Yeah, it's the system, it's the problem. And what I would hope is that we could have a conversation which acknowledges, yes, the way the system impacts, but other forces, including your own responsibility there. That would be my hope. Can we talk about why this is happening? So you see, I've set up a different gap. I've set up a process gap that says the gap is, when I talk to you about behavior, you blame the system. My expectation is that when we talk about behavior, we look at lots of reasons, including the ways you're responsible for it. And that's an entirely different kind of conversation to have.
Fantastic. We're really excited for you coming to the UAE for the first time, here to bring crucial influence to a client of ours who is now going global. They've done an amazing job of building their business in the UAE, and now it's time to take Made in the UAE external. And that brings a whole set of new challenges, I suppose, around how they influence policymakers, other governments, other business owners. So without saying anything too much about that client, and we're very proud that you're here to do that work, how would you help businesses that are made in the UAE go global and spread the word and influence perhaps outside of what's been their normal environment?
Yes, yes. It's so exciting. It is really exciting to see the expertise that has been built here and how much potential for good it has in the world outside the UAE. So as a global citizen, I'm excited to have you start exporting some of what you've been able to build here to the rest of the world. I think the challenge when it comes to say, how do we export that expertise and how do we start to influence others, is that we have to fundamentally shift how you may have thought about influence in the past. So again, oftentimes our base level of how should I influence is to draw on whatever source of power I might have. I'm the boss, I'm the leader, this is what we're going to do, here we go, and people follow, and so that's great. When you move out of those power structures where suddenly you're not my direct report, you're my client or someone, a foreign government or someone else that I want to influence, I can't just simply use my source of power. And that then requires a shift of, kind of a shift of mindset, almost a 180 turn, because mostly when we talk about influence, we think about what do I have that I can use to influence someone else? And it starts from a very me-centered focus. But the most effective influence starts from a you-centered focus. When I look at the other person and say, what is important to them? What really drives them? What skills and ability do they have? What skills and ability do they lack? How can I then help that person? And it starts from understanding what it is that's driving them so that I can then connect my solution, my expertise to something they already want. I don't actually have to really power anything. I simply just have to tap into what they already want and show my solution.
Fantastic, Emily. It's a joy to have you here in the Middle East region. It's a joy for you to bring both crucial conversations, crucial accountability, and crucial learning to help Biz Group and these clients make a difference in the world.
Well, Hazel, thank you for having me. What Biz Group has built here and the work that you're doing is just phenomenal and inspiring, and it's an honor to be a part of it.